Hey everyone, welcome back to Devverse. Today we're diving into an exciting topic: how to use APIs in JavaScript in 2024. Whether you're a beginner or looking to brush up on your skills, this video is for you. So let's get started. First thing first, what exactly is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's a set of protocols, routines, and tools that allows different software applications to communicate with each other. In essence, an API defines the methods and data formats that application can use to request and exchange information. To understand it better, think of an API as a waiter at a restaurant. Just as a waiter takes your order, passes it to the kitchen, and then brings your food back to you, an API takes requests from a user or an application, sends those requests to another service or application, and then delivers the response back. First, let's create a folder that is going to hold all the files of our application. Let's create a file for the HTML and another for the JavaScript. Let's set up a basic layout of the HTML. All you have to do is type exclamation mark. Now let's link JavaScript to HTML, to scripts, src, script.js. Alright, one thing to know is when working with APIs, there are some tools that we need to use to make requests to these APIs. In this video, I'm going to use Thunder Client. Thunder Client is an extension of VS Code that helps us make requests to our APIs, and it's very simple to use. As I said earlier, we're going to use JSON placeholder API for this video. Alright, so we're actually on the JSON placeholder API website. And now to know how to use this API, we have to go on the guides. So click on guides, and then you can see an example of how to use this specific API. Alright, so here we have the URL of the API, and this is an endpoint. Think of an endpoint like a specific door on a building. Just as each door in the building leads to a different room, each API endpoint leads to a different set of data or functionality within the service. So that's what an endpoint is. And now what we want to do is test this API endpoint /posts. So we just copy this URL, come back to VS Code in our Thunder Client, new requests, and then we paste in the URL we just copied, and then make sure to be on get. It's very important. All you have to do is just click on send to send a request to the API at this endpoint to have a response in JSON format. Okay, good. Now that we made sure that we have this data, what we want to do now is actually fetch this data from our JavaScript and render the result to the HTML. Let's get started. Okay, now let's declare the URL that is going to hold the URL of the API at the endpoint posts. And now let's create a function that is going to retrieve the data from this specific API. First, let's declare data that is a variable that is going to hold all the data that is in this specific endpoint. So let data. And now let's create a function to fetch the data from this API and give the result to the data variable. So const fetch data async function, and the data is actually equal to await fetch URL, then response.json. Let's break down what's happening here. The async keyword before the function means it's an asynchronous function. This allows us to use the await keyword inside, which makes working with promises easier. Think of it like telling JavaScript, hey, I'm going to be waiting for some stuff to finish before I move on. Inside of the function, we have await fetch URL. Fetch URL is a call to the fetch API, which sends a request to the specified URL, in this case, JSON placeholder API, and retrieves data from it. The fetch function returns a promise, which is like a placeholder for the data that we'll get back in the future. By using await, we pause the function until the function resolves. This means JavaScript will wait for the data to be fetched from the URL before moving on the next line of code. A response is the response object we get back from the fetch request. Response.json converts this response into JSON format, which is a common format for data exchange on the web. And the .then part is used to handle the promise returned by response.json. Now let's log this data to the console. Data, and execute this function. Now let's get to the browser to see if it works. Coming back to the HTML and go live. I use live server, which is an extension in VS Code. Live server. It helps seeing changes in the browser without having to refresh the entire page. So as you can see in this example. Now let's get back to our browser and see in the console if the data is logged. And yeah, as you can see, the data fetched from the server is actually logged in the console, as you can see. Now we can use this data and display it on our web page. Now let's implement the logic to display the data on our web page. First, I'll get the body. And now I'll create a loop to display each element in the data. Create elements div.text contents element.title. So in the response, we have user ID, title, and body. But to keep this tutorial simple, we just use the title. Now we append it to the body, and that's it. Now we can get back to our browser and see the changes. And that's a wrap for today's tutorial. We've explored how to use APIs in JavaScript, how to handle asynchronous operations. I hope you found this video helpful and that you're excited to try it out on your own projects. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to ring the bell icon so you get notified every time we post new tutorial and tips. Got any questions or feedback? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if there is a topic you'd like me to cover next time, let me know. Happy coding!